Hey guys, tonight we drift into a story that smells like damp moss, cracked reeds, and mild divine overreaction. You're standing at the edge of a forest, somewhere ancient, somewhere soft, and the moonlight's caught on something glinting in the mud. You squint. It's a flute, abandoned, half buried, at the edge of a sluggish, snoring stream. The water barely moves, the trees don't bother to sway, and even the frogs are too sleepy to croak. It's the kind of quiet that hums louder the longer you stand in it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, what time is it, where you are, and where are you listening from? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're barefoot, you're curious. You crouch down to inspect the flute, bone white, still cold despite the sun having set hours ago. 2 finger holes are blocked with a bit of dirt. There's a faint shimmer along the edge, almost like a fingerprint left in silver. You probably shouldn't touch it, but you're going to anyway, because you're not a cautious hero. You're Marsyas, a satyr, which means half man, half goat, full-time chaos. You've got hooves that leave muddy imprints and a beard that never behaves, and while you know better than to mess with strange instruments left lying around, you're also extremely bored. There are no parties tonight, no revels. The god Dionysus is off sulking somewhere, which means no wine, no drums, and worst of all, no dancing girls with ivy crowns. So, naturally, you poke the flute. Nothing happens. You pick it up. Still nothing. But the instant your lips press against the edge, the world leans forward. Not dramatically, not in a thunder and lightning way, just slightly. Like the trees are listening, like the water forgets to ripple, like the air doesn't want to interrupt. You blow, badly. A sharp, shrill, whimpering sound comes out, somewhere between a hiccup and a goose sneezing. Birds flinch. A lizard scurries into the grass. You try again. Softer, longer, and this time it doesn't sound so awful. It warbles. It carries. It loops around your horns and settles into your chest like a second heartbeat. And just like that, you're in love. Not with the flute, not exactly, but with the idea that maybe you've found something worth doing alone when the wine is dried up and the forest's gone quiet and the god of chaos isn't returning your prayers. You wipe the mud from the flute's carved end and notice something odd, an engraving. Faint, etched deep into the grain of bone or wood or whatever this strange thing is made of. You can't read it. Satyrs aren't known for their literacy, but it looks old, intentional. A warning or a signature, or maybe both. Still you shrug. You're Marsyas. You've stolen worse. Over the next few days, you play. Morning, evening, twilight. You practice near rivers, in caves, under bridges. You don't play well yet, but the flute forgives you. It's the kind of instrument that improves if you simply believe you're getting better. And you do. Little tunes emerge playful, odd, full of wobbly joy. The forest begins to remember you for something other than spilled wine and clumsy flirting. A fox pauses to listen. A deer blinks and doesn't run. A crow mimics a tune you didn't know you were repeating. You don't know it yet, but you've done something dangerous. You've woken attention, not mortal attention, not woodland creatures or nymph gossip, but divine attention. Because this flute, it wasn't meant to be found. And the goddess who abandoned it didn't expect some muddy-fingered goat man with uneven horns to breathe life back into her discarded regrets. You'll find that out soon. But for now, you sit on a rock, legs folded, flute balanced on your knee, and you hum a tune no one taught you. And the trees hum back. The flute hums when you sleep. Not loudly, not like it's trying to wake you, but softly, like it's remembering something. And every morning, when you open your eyes, it's there resting beside you on a blanket of leaves you're pretty sure weren't there the night before. You don't question it. You're Marsyas. You question nothing except why olives taste so much better stolen. But the flute, it's becoming something more than a toy. It's a habit, a voice, a secret. And the more you play it, the more it seems to know what you want to say, even when you don't know how to say it. The melodies are getting sharper, bolder. You try tricks, runs, and trills, and strange scales that wouldn't make sense to anyone but a satyr with too much time and not enough supervision. And yet, every time the wind shifts, the flute changes too, as if it's adjusting to the air, as if the air remembers. One evening while playing under the boughs of a crooked olive tree, you get bold. You try a riff you've never played before. Your hooves tap in rhythm. You laugh mid-note, send a high warbling sound into the clouds, and the clouds, they stop. Just stop. Like they forgot what they were doing. You lower the flute. The wind has stilled. The leaves hold still, as if listening for something else. And then, from somewhere nowhere, a whisper of a memory drifts into the woods. That flute belonged to a goddess. You don't hear the voice, but you feel it, like cold fingers down your spine, like someone looking at you from across a history you didn't know you were standing in. You don't know the story yet, but we do. So here it is. Long before Marsyas, long before the flute landed in mud and moss, it was forged in the hands of someone with infinitely more wisdom and infinitely less patience. Athena. Yes, that Athena, goddess of war, wisdom, strategy, and the 1,000-yard stare. Her mind, sharper than any sword, her eyes colder than the sea she came from. One day, according to the old stories, she crafted a flute out of what we don't know. Some say deer bone, some say hollow silver, some say the breath of a dying oracle hardened into sound. But the important part is this: she made it herself, and for a while she played, not for crowds, not for Olympus, just for herself. The sound piercing, sweet, unlike anything heard before or since. They say the mountains leaned in to listen, that rivers adjusted their flow to the tempo, that birds stilled their wings just to feel the vibration across their feathers. But something went wrong, not with the sound, with the look. One day, Athena caught her own reflection in a still pond as she played. The flute distorted her face, puffed her cheeks, creased her brow, made her look well, not very divine. And Athena, she did not do undignified. She threw the flute to the earth furious, not at the sound, but at how it made her look. She declared it cursed. She ordered it buried. She swore that anyone who played it again would be brought low for the arrogance of assuming they could shape a sound made by a god. No one dared touch it. Until now. Until you. Marsyas, the wandering satyr playing tunes on the bones of a goddess's embarrassment. You, who had no idea that with every note, every song you were weaving yourself into a myth that didn't want to be remembered. Because that's the thing with gods, they rarely forgive, but they never forget. Somewhere high above, nestled in the marble halls of Olympus, Athena turns her head. She hears a song drifting up from below, one she knows, one she wrote. She narrows her eyes. But it's not her wrath that wakes first. It's someone else. Another god. Another musician. Someone with a lyre made of golden string and the ego of a constellation. Apollo. And he hears it too. You don't know it yet, but far above your muddy little clearing on a throne that smells like laurel and sun-warmed marble, Apollo stirs. Not dramatically. He doesn't leap to his feet, throw thunderbolts, or call an emergency symposium. No, Apollo's brand of irritation is quieter, controlled, the kind that smiles before it judges. He's listening, one hand resting on the neck of his lyre, his fingers still. There it is again, that tune, rising like smoke from the mortal world below, a little off-key, a little wild, but undeniably melodic. It curls upward note by note until it hits him right between the temples, and something in his chest tightens. Not because the music is bad. No, that would be easy. It's because the music is almost good. And almost for Apollo is worse than failure. He narrows his golden eyes. Who dares play like that? He murmurs, without permission. Around him the muses pretend not to hear. They've seen this before, this mood. It's competitive divine energy, and it's exhausting. You see, Apollo doesn't just love music. He is music, god of the lyre, god of harmony, god of light precision and inspiration. Also, god of my way, or the sacred highway. And yet here's this melody floating up from the forests of Phrygia, played on a discarded flute, with no structure, no formal training, no sacred scales, just joy, improvisation, imbalance, and worst of all, emotion. Apollo sighs, and that's when the muses know they're in trouble, because when Apollo sighs, something dramatic is usually just over the horizon, back on Earth, in a grove no one ever maps properly, You are still playing. Marsyas, the satyr, barefoot, tangled hair, mud on your thighs, flute pressed to your lips like it belongs there. You're not thinking about gods. You're thinking about how the sunlight looks when it falls through the olive branches, how the breeze seems to sync with your notes, how the old goat that usually ignores you is now swaying gently, like a leaf caught in rhythm. You're thinking, maybe I'm actually good at this. Maybe, just maybe, this is what purpose feels like. And somewhere, Athena's flute hums faintly in agreement. But higher up in the echoing atriums of Olympus, a small golden-haired god is tapping his fingers. Apollo, still seated now, strums a single chord across his lyre. The sound is perfect. Of course it is. But it doesn't feel the way that flute music did. Not unpolished, not accidental, not alive. He tightens his jaw, because here's the thing no one says out loud: gods hate being ignored. And lately, no one's been singing hymns about Apollo's musical triumphs. They still light fires and ask for prophecy. Yes, but the adoration has cooled, and this flute, this noise from the forest, it's drawing attention. Too much. He stands, stretches. His robes gleam like sunlight striking a blade. His skin glows faintly, like dawn deciding which direction to rise in. He says nothing to the muses, just picks up his lyre and walks toward the staircase that descends to earth. The muses exchange a look. Calliope raises an eyebrow. Clio exhales dramatically. He's going down there again, one of them whispers. Let him, says Terpsichore. Maybe the satyr's actually good. A pause, and then soft laughter. But it's not mocking, just nervous, because they know what Apollo does when he finds a challenge, especially one he didn't invent. Meanwhile, you're still in the woods, swaying with your own music, unaware that the sun has gotten brighter in one specific corner of the sky. You finish a tune with a little flourish, your new signature, and flop backward into the grass with a grin. And that's when you hear it, a single note, strummed with such clarity, it makes your chest seize. It's not loud, not even close, but it's clean, like a drop of perfect water landing on still glass. You sit up, blink. There, between two trees that weren't there a second ago, is a figure made entirely of grace and menace. He's holding a lyre. He's glowing, and he's smiling in the way lions do when they find something curious. Nice sound, he says, voice like honey, boiled in steel. You stand. The flute slips slightly in your grip. You recognize him immediately. Everyone does. Even satyrs. Even you. Apollo. You do what any self-respecting satyr would do when faced with the literal god of music standing 10 feet away, radiating golden judgment. You try not to drop the flute. Your hooves shift awkwardly in the dirt. Your ears twitch. You suddenly become very aware of how uneven your beard is and how long it's been since you bathed in anything fancier than a rain puddle. Apollo doesn't blink. He doesn't need to. His eyes are the kind that make other people blink first. He's watching you like a cat watches a slightly clever mouse, curious, a little annoyed, and not entirely sure if he should let you keep living. You clear your throat. Hi. Silence. You try again. Nice day, huh? Still nothing. Apollo's lyre gleams in his hand like it's been waiting its whole existence to be dramatically plucked in this exact moment. He finally speaks. You play well. Your tail flicks involuntarily, praise from a god. But he continues smoothly for a creature with no training, no technique, no divine favor. Ah, there it is. You bristle. I mean, it's just a flute. His head tilts. Athena's flute. Oops. You grip it tighter. I found it. You took it. You open your mouth, then shut it again. Technically accurate, but it was just lying there in the mud, unloved and unattended. Apollo steps forward, and for the first time the forest around you actually reacts. Trees lean away, leaves still mid-rustle. Even the birds, usually so disrespectfully loud, go quiet. He smiles without warmth. You've been playing. You nod slowly. Every day. Another step. Without permission. You nod again slower. Then something odd happens. Apollo's gaze shifts not to you, but to the flute in your hand. He stares at it the way a craftsman stares at a tool gone dull in someone else's workshop. And beneath his tone you catch something unexpected. Jealousy. Not because you're better, please, but because that sound, the one floating through the trees like mist, didn't come from him. And that to Apollo is almost unforgivable. He raises the lyre. Play something. You hesitate. Not because you're scared, okay, maybe a little, but because there's something in the way he asks, like a trap disguised as flattery. But still, you've never been good at resisting dares. You raise the flute to your lips and blow. Not your best tune, not your most complicated, just something simple, something true. A soft, spiraling trill that dances around a single, repeating note, like a bee circling a flower. You close your eyes and play. When you stop, the silence feels heavier than it should. Apollo nods once, then plays his lyre. It's beautiful, of course, perfect, refined. Each note lands exactly where it's supposed to, like an army of sound marching in flawless formation. You imagine the birds would weep if they weren't too intimidated to make noise right now. You clap awkwardly. Because what else do you do? Apollo doesn't return the gesture. He simply says, "Let's make it official." You blink. What he repeats with the calm of someone who has never once been told no a contest. Your mind races. A musical duel. You versus the actual god of music. That's like challenging Poseidon to a swimming race, or trying to outdrink Dionysus, or suggesting Hades try lightening up. You start to shake your head, but Apollo raises a brow and his sun gets just a little brighter behind him. He says nothing else, because he doesn't need to. This is not a request. It's a performance already in motion, and your role has been cast. You, Marsyas the Satyr, who found a flute in the mud, are about to play music for your life. Possibly quite literally. Still something inside you stirs. You think, maybe I can do this. You think I've played every day. You think the trees clapped for me. They didn't. Trees don't have hands. But you felt it, and maybe, just maybe, you want to know if it's true, if what you feel when you play is real, or just the echo of loneliness bouncing off reeds. You straighten up. You lift your chin. You nod. Okay, you say. Apollo's smile widens, the kind of smile that says, excellent. The kind of smile that says, you're going to regret this. And somewhere deep in the roots of the mountain, the muses begin whispering to each other. A contest has been declared. And the gods, they love a good performance, especially when someone is destined to lose. The sun doesn't just rise the next morning. It announces itself, as if Apollo in his infinite theatrical glory decided this ordinary patch of mortal dirt needed the most radiant spotlight ever thrown by the heavens. Rays pierce the forest canopy like golden spears. The shadows flee. Even the dew evaporates early, as if it has somewhere better to be than under the judgmental eyes of a god with a lyre. You, Marsyas, wake up in a pile of leaves that smells vaguely like moss goat and poor decisions. Your back hurts. Your horns itch. And then you remember the contest. You groan. Not because you're scared, though maybe you should be, but because you didn't expect your casual flute noodling to turn into a divine showdown. Apollo's already waiting. He doesn't look like he slept, probably because he didn't need to. Gods don't nap. They glow. He's seated on a carved rock that looks suspiciously throne-like for something he just found. His lyre rests across his lap. His robe catches the light at impossible angles. You squint at him. He smirks, and then without a word he begins to play. It's a song about sunshine and symmetry, about perfect harmony and things that never go wrong. It sparkles, it shimmers, it climbs invisible stairs made of rhythm. Birds sing along, not because they want to, but because they're compelled. That's the thing about Apollo's music. It commands. It leaves no room for interruption. When he finishes, the forest breathes out in collective awe. Even the squirrels look impressed. He turns to you and says, "Your turn." You step forward. Your hooves leave small prints in the dirt. You lift the flute, grip it a little too tight and think, "Don't panic." Then you blow, and from your lungs spills something no one expected. Not even you. It's a little clumsy, a little messy, but it moves. It skips instead of glides. It stumbles, pauses, laughs at itself, then recovers. It tells a story of morning fog and late-night dancing and heartbreak that doesn't quite hurt anymore. And it makes the leaves shiver, not with fear, with feeling. Even Apollo blinks. Just once, but enough. You finish with a high wobbly note and a shrug. The forest is still, and then a slow clap from someone you didn't know was here. Dionysus. Oh, yes. He's leaning against a tree, wine cup in hand, grinning like someone who's just been handed popcorn and front row seats to a divine disaster. You've got guts, goat boy, he says. You half bow. Thanks, he raises his cup. Don't die too fast. It ruins the drama. The contest continues, not for hours, for days. Each morning, Apollo plays something flawless. He performs melodies that describe moonlight hitting temple stone, hymns so precise, so mathematically divine you feel smaller just hearing them. And each time you play something a little different. One morning, a tune about falling out of a tree and laughing anyway. Another day, a rhythm that makes the deer do a weird jig you swear it was dancing. Your music isn't perfect, but it's alive, and the crowd grows. Nymphs, satyrs, woodland spirits, even the odd, curious mortal who wandered too far off the path. They don't cheer, they don't dare it, but they feel. And that makes Apollo furious. Not openly, of course. He's far too elegant for that. But you can tell. His songs get sharper, colder, less about beauty, more about control. You begin to realize something strange. He isn't playing to win. He's playing not to lose. Because in Olympus, losing to a satyr, a hooved, chaotic, wine-stained side character, is unthinkable. And so, on the final day, he declares, one last round. You nod. Your fingers tremble just slightly. You're exhausted. Your lips ache from playing. Your throat feels dry from blowing life into something that isn't even yours. But you raise the flute anyway. And you play. It's your best yet. It tells no story. It is the story. It starts with the sound of loneliness, rises into mischief, flirts with disaster, and somehow lands softly in something like joy. The notes aren't perfect, but they aren't supposed to be. When you stop, no one speaks. Even the wind waits, and then Apollo smiles. Not the smug smile, the other one. The one that says, trap. I propose a change, he says. Let's raise the stakes. Your ears flick back how, and let's play upside down. You blink. What Apollo gestures, casual, elegant, as if suggesting a new flavor of tea. You hang upside down from that tree while you play. The crowd stirs. The nymphs whisper. You look at him confused. Why would I agree to that? He shrugs. Because it will prove who's truly master of their instrument. If you're as skilled as you pretend it should be, no trouble. Dionysus chokes on his wine. Even he knows this is dirty. You glance at the crowd, at the muses, now watching quietly from the edges of the clearing, at the flute in your hand, still faintly warm, and something in you, a combination of pride, foolishness, and flute-induced madness, says, okay. Apollo grins, because this was always the plan. The ropes aren't elegant. Their vines really twisted and scratchy, dug from the edge of the grove by a helpful nymph who mutters something about bad ideas and worse endings as she ties your ankles. You're upside down now, dangling like a particularly nervous fruit from a low-hanging tree limb. Your hair, what little of it that isn't tangled with twigs, hangs toward the forest floor. Your vision pulses slightly with each beat of your heart, which is currently doing a convincing impression of an overexcited drum solo. You wiggle, not much, because one wrong move and you'll spin. And spinning is not ideal for flute performance, competitive or otherwise. Apollo, meanwhile, looks positively radiant. He's standing at a perfectly measured distance, one foot resting lightly on a mossy stone lyre, poised like it belongs to him, because it does. He's not even sweating, not even breathing hard, just smiling the way cats do before they pounce. "You ready?" he calls, as if this is all a friendly jam session and not a divine power play, wrapped in harp strings and ego. You try to nod. It comes out as a sway. Then the music begins. Apollo plays first. Of course he does. The lyre sings. No preens. Every note is a shimmering diamond. Every phrase lands like a kiss on polished marble. He's showing off. But more than that, he's weaponizing the rules because he knows what's coming. You, upside down, with a flute designed by a goddess who hated how it puffed her cheeks. You take a breath, which is harder than it should be, because your diaphragm has apparently forgotten how gravity works. You raise the flute to your lips, or really lower your lips to the flute and begin. It's awkward at first. The notes spill sideways. Your fingers slip. The first phrase collapses like a drunk satyr trying to do ballet. A few of the audience members wince, but you don't stop. You adjust. You blow again. This time something steadier emerges. A single thread of melody, warbling sure but clear, defiant. You keep going. And the music, it finds itself. There's something strange about being upside down. You hear differently. The way the notes travel down instead of up. The way your lungs have to work harder, pulling sound from someplace deeper, less polished. The song that rises now is not like the others. It's not cheerful, not cheeky. It's raw, a little ugly even. But it aches. It tells the story of every creature who ever tried to belong somewhere they weren't invited. It hums with the weight of every god's careless cruelty, every beautiful thing that got thrown into the mud because it didn't sparkle quite right. It whispers, "I was not made for your temples, but I sing anyway." And the forest leans in. Even Apollo falters, just for half a heartbeat, but it's there. A tiny pause in the rhythm. A blink. The audience doesn't move. They've forgotten how. And when you finish the last note, trembling in the air, like a leaf refusing to fall, you let the flute drop to your chest and wait, Silence. Then Apollo laughs. Softly. Impressive, he says. Very expressive. You blink. Still hanging. Still swaying slightly. He steps forward. And then the words that change everything. But let's ask the judges. You frown. What judges? He turns, gestures, and from the shadows of the grove step 9 figures, the muses. You groan. Internally, of course. The muses, goddesses of art and inspiration, sisters of song and story, Apollo's biggest fans and, incidentally, his family. Fair, hardly. Expected. Absolutely. Calliope, the eldest, steps forward. She doesn't smile. That's something, at least. She looks at Apollo, then at you, then at the flute still pressed to your chest. Her voice is cool and unreadable. The contest was close. Your heart trips over itself. That's a good sign, right? But she continues. Apollo played with perfection. You played with, she hesitates, almost distastefully feeling. You brace yourself. In matters of divine music, she says perfection must prevail. There it is, the verdict. And though you don't fall, you feel like the branch above you just cracked. Apollo doesn't cheer. He doesn't gloat. He just looks at you, head tilted, and says, "You played well." A pause. But rules are rules. And then he steps closer, too close. You flinch. But he doesn't strike. He just lifts the flute, takes it from your hands, and snaps it. One clean motion. No anger. Just ceremony. The sound is soft, but final. And then he drops the 2 pieces into the grass and walks away. The crowd begins to fade. The muses dissolve into mist. Even Dionysus is gone, leaving behind a half-empty cup and a note that just says, "Told you." And you're still hanging, upside down, in a tree that suddenly feels far too tall. You close your eyes and breathe, because the music is gone, but your hands still remember how it felt. And maybe, just maybe, the story isn't over. Not yet. You don't fall, not right away at least. It takes a while, long after Apollo's sandals vanish into divine mist, long after the last nymph politely coughs and slips into a tree. Eventually, the branch groans, like it too is tired of holding this ridiculous story aloft. Then, snap. You hit the ground. Not hard, just humiliatingly. You lie there for a moment staring at the upside-down sky. The grass tickles your ears. Your legs feel like badly tied noodles. You wonder if this is what failure always smells like: earth leaves and a faint hint of broken promise. You sit up, look around, and there, a few feet away in the flattened grass, lie the 2 halves of the flute. Clean break. One piece still holds the embouchure, the mouth hole, the memory, the part that hummed with your breath. You pick it up, hold it, and for a moment you think, maybe I can fix this. But it's not just broken. It's dead. The warmth is gone. No goddess spark. No satyr laughter. Just splintered wood and the silence that follows when a story ends too soon. You bury it, not deeply, just enough to say goodbye. And then you walk back into the forest, back into the world that doesn't care whether you almost changed everything. You walk for hours, maybe days. You forget to count. And somewhere along the way, the whispers start. Not out loud, not voices in your head either, just murmurs drifting from moss and stone. Little things, like you were robbed, and he couldn't stand to lose. And faintest of all, but you were better, you shake them off, but they follow you anyway. Word spreads, it always does. The satyr who dared to duel a god, the musician who made a grove cry, the fool who played upside down and made the sun blink. You never tell the story, not fully, because the ending hurts. And endings aren't your favorite part anyway. Still, the world starts to change. A little. There's a poet in Thebes who hums one of your old tunes in the market square. A shepherd in Arcadia finds himself whistling a melody he swears he dreamed. A sculptor in Athens carves a satyr into marble flute, raised expression defiant. You never met them, but they know you, the way people know a myth. And far, far away in a throne room, laced with cloud and gold, Apollo listens. He says nothing, but sometimes when no one's looking, he tunes his lyre twice, just to be sure. Because there's a shadow in his music now, a small, stubborn imperfection, a little trill at the end of a phrase. It makes the muses tilt their heads. He plays through it, but it's there. You, meanwhile, live, which is more than most who challenge gods can say. You play again, eventually, not with a flute, not right away, but your fingers itch for rhythm. Your hooves tap out patterns. You hum to yourself, to the trees, to no one. And that's how the new music begins. It's quieter now, but braver, more honest, less perfect, and somehow more yours. Because even when the gods write the rules, mortals write the songs that survive. Time passes. The gods are timeless, but you're not. Satyrs age slowly but surely, especially ones who've lived too close to stories. And now with your name scattered on mortal lips, like pollen in spring, you feel the shift in the wind. You stay away from Olympus. Obviously, once you've been declared a cautionary tale, invitations tend to dry up. Not that you were ever invited to begin with, but now you're more than a background laugh. You're Marsyas, the one who made a god blink, the one who almost, and almost is a dangerous word in the divine world. It echoes. The nymphs treat you differently now, some with admiration, others with pity, and a few with that uncomfortable reverence usually reserved for tragic statues. You don't love it. You'd prefer a good wine and a worse joke. But the world has decided what you are now. A story, a warning, a legend, with hooves and a footnote. So you keep walking. You move from grove to grove, hills springs the occasional lonely olive orchard. You play a little here and there, mostly on reed pipes you carve yourself. Nothing fancy, nothing that might upset a certain glowing deity watching from above. But there's a new hum in the earth. Not a sound, exactly more like a feeling, as if the soil remembers you, as if the trees carry your tune in their rings. And the people haven't forgotten. There's a farmer's daughter who sings one of your melodies while tending goats. She doesn't know it's yours. She just hums it when the morning's soft and the clouds roll lazily across the hills. There's a potter who inscribes a Satyr on a jug, upside down, flute raised, laughing. It becomes a bestseller, sold out in 3 markets. Apollo's name doesn't appear anywhere. The muses notice, eventually, and they aren't pleased, not because they hate you, but because chaos doesn't sit well in Olympus, and you, dear Marsyas, are the ripple in their glassy pool of perfect art. So it begins again, subtle at first. A rumor here, a bard with a curiously twisted version of your tale there. In one retelling, you never played a note. In another, your music made trees die. In one particularly cruel rendition, you challenged Apollo out of drunken jealousy, fell flat, and were crushed by your own flute. You laugh when you hear that one. You'd cry if you cared more. But the worst version, the one that sticks, that's the one with the punishment. According to it, after the contest, Apollo didn't simply break your flute. He flayed you alive, hung you from a tree, let your skin ripple like a banner as a warning to all who think mortal noise can rival divine harmony. It spreads like wildfire. A punishment so grotesque, so vivid, it eclipses the real story. You become a myth within a myth. And the problem with myths, they don't ask permission. One day a sculptor carves you like that dangling broken eternal. He means well, says it's a tribute, says your courage inspired him, says suffering is noble. You don't visit him again. Still you endure, because the truth has legs, even when limping, and in the quiet spaces between gods and mortals. There are still children who hear your melody in the wind and wonder where it came from. There are still old women who swear they saw a satyr with kind eyes playing a tune so soft the stars leaned closer to hear. You remain, not because Olympus allows it, but because the world needs it, needs someone to prove that feeling beats perfection, that a cracked reed can still sing, that gods aren't the only ones who make beauty, and so you play, in the shadow of trees that remember, on stones warmed by old sun, by rivers that carry your reflection, distorted but smiling. And every now and then, when the moon is low and the wind forgets itself, you hear something distant. A lyre, practicing, adjusting, trying just once to capture a sound it didn't create, and you smile. Because even gods remember, especially the ones who lose. You learn to live between echoes, between what happened and what the world believes happened, between the crack of a flute splitting in two and the sound that came before it, between the soft, ordinary truths and the loud, dramatic fiction that now wears your name. Some mornings you wake to birds mimicking your old melodies, not perfectly, but with that same stumble, that same joy. You whistle back, half teasing, half proud. They don't care about gods or contests. Just the tune. Other days, you see your face scratched into bark, carved into stone walls of village temples, etched with a look of wild-eyed courage you're fairly sure you never wore. One statue has you holding a flute like a weapon. Another shows you mid-scream face, twisted limbs bound. Neither one feels like you, but you nod to them anyway. Because in a world where truth bends, the best you can do is walk beside it, not against. And speaking of bending truth, one afternoon while sipping wine from a chipped clay cup and watching clouds pretend they're not following you, a young traveler finds you. He's wiry, barefoot, smells like thyme and road dust, carries a lyre. Not the lyre, of course. This one's handmade, string slightly out of tune. Probably stolen, probably loved. Are you Marsyas? He asks. You shrug. Some days. I heard you lost. You nod. That part's true. I heard you bled all over the earth, and that's why the river sings now. You raise an eyebrow. Did the river actually tell you that? He grins. No. But it sounds better than he wandered off into obscurity and started talking to trees. You like this one. He sits, plays a clumsy tune. You correct his fingering. He winces, laughs, starts again. And just like that, it begins the quiet legacy. You become not a lesson, not a warning, but a mentor. Wandering satyrs and stubborn shepherds and wide-eyed musicians find you. They don't ask for Olympus. They just want to feel something again. And you teach them how to carve a flute that won't betray you, how to play the sad note without fear, how to lose with flair and love anyway. But you never mention Apollo, not directly, not by name. You call him the sun boy or divine glitter pants or just him. And when someone brings up the flaying, you sigh. Not angrily, just tired. It didn't happen like that, you say. Then you take a sip of wine and change the subject to meter or breath control, because you know what really happened. And he does too. Somewhere in the gleaming heights of Olympus, Apollo hears your name more often than he'd like. Usually muttered, sometimes sung, occasionally carved into instruments, gifted by those who've never seen perfection, only possibility. He doesn't speak of you. But once, just once, he invites a mortal musician to play in his temple. The boy brings a flute. Apollo flinches, only slightly. The tune is raw, untrained, but it has a heart. And after the boy finishes trembling, expecting lightning or scorn, Apollo simply says, again, slower this time. It's not forgiveness, but it's a start. As decades blur, you change, not just your walk or your horns or your voice. but your shape in memory. In one version you become a god yourself, patron of wild music and joyful defiance. In another, you fade into river mist, your songs now bubbles under waterfalls. Some whisper that the trees in Phrygia still hum when no one's listening, that a satyr's laughter echoes just before dawn, that the wind through cracked reeds carries the soul of someone who refused to die quietly. You don't mind the myths anymore. Let them twist. Let them bloom. Because the truth isn't always louder, just steadier. And as long as someone somewhere plays not for praise but for joy, you're still here, not in marble, not in stories, but in every stubborn, beating, imperfect note. And that's enough. You never thought you'd come back. Not to this place. Not to the grove where vines once bound your ankles and Apollo's smile stretched too wide to trust. But time's strange that way. It softens even the sharpest memories, like wind wearing down stone, or like music looping until pain becomes rhythm. The tree is still here, older now, crooked in new places, one branch missing, another blossoming in apology. You place your hand against its bark, rough and warm from the sun. You don't speak, there's no need. The tree remembers. You sit beneath it and wait, because tonight the air is thick with whispers again. Word has gotten around, quiet, careful word, that something is happening. A contest. Not between gods, not this time, but mortals. Musicians from all corners of the land. Lute players, lyre pluckers, reed blowers, and some odd girl who insists on clapping rocks together in rhythm. You'd laugh. You do, actually. And then you see the judges, the muses, all 9 of them, again, still glowing, still graceful, but different now, less smug, more curious. A few of them even nod when they see you. One to the youngest terpsichore maybe gives you a wink. You pretend not to notice. The musicians gather, one by one. They bow to the muses, to the crowd, to each other. And then they begin. Not in grand harmony, not in formal order, just one by one. A boy with a 3-string lyre starts it. His fingers shake. His notes quiver like leaves in wind. But he plays, and the grove listens. Then a girl steps forward. Her flute has a crack, her song breaks halfway through, but she keeps going head high, eyes closed. You're not competing. But somehow this feels more like your battle than the one with Apollo ever did, because this time they're not playing to win. They're playing to say something. One of them, a broad-shouldered farmer's son with dirt still under his nails, sings a ballad about a lost goat. It's terrible, but also deeply moving. You cry a little. You blame the wind. When it ends, the muses don't declare a winner. They just nod and vanish, and no one claps. No one needs to. The grove holds the silence like a sacred gift. Later, around a fire of crackling pine cones, the musicians share food and stories. Someone passes around a wine jug. Someone else plays a slow, lilting tune on a jaw harp. Someone starts snoring. You lie on your back and look at the stars. You think maybe this is what the gods never understood, that music doesn't belong to those who demand perfection. It belongs to those who need it, to those who hurt, to those who hope, to those who find a broken thing and whisper play anyway. You fall asleep to the sound of breath and string. You dream of rivers and roots and laughter. Somewhere far above Apollo sits in a temple of polished stone. His lyre is tuned, his fingers are still, and in his ear faintly he hears the grove, the notes, the flaws, the life in it. And for once he doesn't try to outplay it. He just listens. The stars wheel overhead, and the music keeps going, because it never needed to be perfect, only true. You wake with dew in your hair and a beetle on your nose. Not quite the majestic return you imagined for a myth, but then again, you've always been more moss than marble. You sit up, stretch and blink at the grove around you, scattered sleeping bodies, empty cups, a reed pipe still humming faintly from where it fell onto a patch of clover. The contest is over, but no one seems eager to leave. That's the thing about shared music. It binds people like spider silk or wine breath. You can't always see the thread, but it tugs at you, ties you to strangers, to moments, to memory. Someone hands you a crust of bread and a smear of goat cheese. You grunt your thanks, take a bite, and stare out into the soft blue light of morning. This feels like something. Not a triumph, not a second chance, but something alive. And while you chew, the girl with the cracked flute from the night before sits beside you. I heard a story once, she says, that the god of music lost to a satyr. You shrug. Did you believe it? She shrugs back. Doesn't matter. The music was better. You grin. You like her. She pulls her flute from her belt, holds it out. It's still cracked. You want to play. You hesitate, just for a heartbeat. Then you take it, and something in your chest unclenches, like a chord resolving. The first note you play is soft. The second is crooked. By the third, birds start singing along. You pass it back. She laughs. You play like someone who knows what it means. You nod. I do. The days roll forward like lazy clouds. One gathering becomes many. The grove becomes a meeting place, a stage, a sanctuary. They call it Marsyas's hollow, in whispers and songs, though you've never claimed it. You just sit and listen, and sometimes play. People bring stories now, songs from distant hills, weird instruments made from bones and antlers, even a child who plays rhythm on a basket of walnuts. Each sound is its own little rebellion against silence. You love it. But the best part, no one plays for gods. They play for each other, for the ache in their chest, for the need to be heard. And slowly the myth of you begins to shift again. The flayed satyr becomes the flawed teacher. The warning becomes the whisper. The scream becomes the chord. Even the muses, curious as always, send the occasional scout, a nymph here, a whispering breeze there. Nothing official, of course, but enough to say, "We see you," and Olympus, well, let's just say they've stopped telling the story of Apollo's flawless victory quite so loudly. Because now there's nuance, doubt, variation, and gods hate variation. It makes their truths feel more like choices. One night, under a moon too full for comfort, a new face appears in the grove. He's older, weathered, wears a cloak that shimmers like dawn. You know him immediately, not because he glows, but because he doesn't. Not anymore. Apollo stands at the edge of the clearing lyre on his back, eyes scanning the musicians gathered around the fire. No one notices him, except you. You say nothing, just pat the log beside you. He walks forward slowly, sits. For a while, neither of you speak. Then he says, "It was never about the notes." You nod. I knew that, he adds. You don't answer, because he didn't. Not back then. He watches the young girl with the cracked flute play a sharp, clumsy song that somehow makes 3 people cry. And he smiles. Not the sun god smile, not the "I win" smile, just something quiet, human, almost tender. "I've been trying," he says. "I know you say." And that's it. Not a reconciliation, not forgiveness. Just 2 musicians sitting side by side, listening as the fire crackles and the melody stumbles and the truth, imperfect and lovely, plays on. By now, you're more silence than sound. Not in the gloomy, melancholy way the old myths might suggest, but in that deep-rooted way that forests learn to listen. You don't need to perform anymore. The world performs around you, and you, Marsyas, are the stillness at its center. You sit on the same log every morning, a little more worn, a little more crooked. There's moss creeping up your hooves. Your ears twitch when a new instrument arrives, when a new voice trembles on its first note. You don't call it teaching, but they learn. They always do. Somewhere between their nervous breathing and the broken rhythm of their fingers, they find it the pulse beneath the song. And you, old satyr, are the only one who can nod just the right way to say, "Yes, that's it." The girl with the cracked flute is back again. Her playing has improved, but she still lets it squeak sometimes, deliberately. She says it keeps the truth in. There's a boy who taps rhythms into a hollow log with nothing but a stick and a stubborn scowl. You gave him no praise. He stayed anyway. There's even a centaur who sings lullabies so low you feel them in your ribs. They gather. They stay. They hum in their sleep. One day a scroll arrives, wrapped in golden ribbon, smelling faintly of ambrosia and smugness. You roll your eyes. You know who sent it. You untie it. Read it once. Then again. Then, just to be petty, a 3rd time upside down. It's an invitation to Olympus to perform at the annual Festival of the Lyre. Apollo's idea, no doubt. Possibly Penelope's handwriting. Definitely some muse's attempt at diplomacy. You laugh, long and loud. The grove turns to look. You hold up the scroll. Anyone want to go play for a bunch of glowing narcissists with great cheekbones? The laughter comes in waves. The girl with the flute raises her hand. Do they have snacks? You grin. Probably. And just like that, it becomes a pilgrimage. It takes a week. 2 donkeys, 7 flutes, 1 minor thunderstorm. By the time you reach the golden steps of Olympus, everyone smells like smoke, effort, and excitement. The gates don't open automatically. You knock, twice. Then, after an awkward pause, you knock rhythmically. A beat, a phrase, a melody. Eventually, the gates part. And there they are. The gods, all of them, shining, polished, so symmetrical, it's suspicious. Apollo stands at the front. He looks different, smaller somehow, still radiant, still unnervingly symmetrical, but softer around the edges, like someone who's finally allowed a little dust into his marble. You raise your chin. He doesn't bow. You don't either. He simply steps aside and gestures to the stage, a platform carved from starlight and memory, floating over a pool of still water that reflects everything. One by one, your ragtag musicians climb up. The cracked flute girl goes first. Her first note wobbles, then steadies, then blooms. The air changes. Even the gods lean forward. Then the boy with the stick, then the centaur, then the walnut drummer. No one claps, but no one blinks either. Then you, old hooved, imperfect you. You don't even bring an instrument. You just hum, a tune from before the contest, from the forest, from the mud, from before you tried to be more than you were. It's raw, it's wrong, and it's the most beautiful thing they've ever heard. When you finish, the gods don't speak. They just rise and bow, all of them, even him, especially him. You bow back, only once, because once is enough. That night, as you descend from Olympus, the grove feels closer than ever, as if you never left, as if the stars followed you home. You lie beneath your tree, breathe in the dirt, the leaves, the memory, and think, maybe this is what victory looks like. Not a prize, not applause, just being heard. You sleep deeper than usual that night, the kind of sleep that isn't just rest, but repair. The kind of sleep where your bones exhale, your memories tangle into gentle knots, and the echoes of applause, not thunderous, just reverent, hum low beneath your dreams. When you wake, the world hasn't changed, not obviously. The birds still argue over breakfast. The breeze still smells faintly of pine and someone's forgotten sandals. The cracked flute girl is already trying to teach a squirrel how to keep rhythm by clapping. But something has shifted, not out there, in you. The weight that's followed you since that first challenge, it's lighter, not gone, but settled, like a stone that's finally found its place in the riverbed. You don't need Olympus to say your name anymore. You don't need your statue to stand taller than his. because your music stood taller. That's enough. The grove changes too. More musicians come from farther lands. Some walk for weeks. Some follow whispered directions scribbled on bark or etched into the margins of old songbooks. They bring strange instruments, drums made from melted coins, flutes carved from lightning-struck branches, and one girl who sings using only vowels and somehow makes it sound like a lullaby from the stars. You welcome them all. No rules, no hierarchy, no divine glitter robes, just space, just sound, just breath. One evening someone asks the inevitable, will there be another contest? You think about it, you sip your wine, you ask, do you mean to win or to be witnessed? They hesitate. Is there a difference? You grin. Only one of them ends with someone crying into a bush. They don't ask again, but they do play. More boldly, less perfectly, more truthfully. And slowly the world beyond begins to notice. Not with trumpets or scrolls, but with rumors, tales told in taverns, scribbled in margins, passed along in lullabies, of a place in the woods where music doesn't serve gods or kings or coins, only honesty. They call it Marsyas's grove. Some say it's cursed, some say it heals, some say the Satyr still walks there barefoot and humming his laughter, echoing like a bird too wild to catch. One afternoon a child arrives, alone, clutching a tiny reed pipe that looks like it was carved with teeth. They don't speak, just sit beside you. Their hands shake. They raise the pipe, blow a single note. It cracks, twice, then holds, barely. You don't say a word, just close your eyes and hum along. The grove listens. The trees lean in. The wind softens. And when the note fades, the child finally speaks. I thought I was broken. You shake your head. No, you were tuning. Later, by the fire, someone sings a ballad about you. It's wildly inaccurate. Apparently, you fought Apollo with a flaming double flute and turned into a river afterward. You laugh so hard, you spill your drink. No one corrects the singer. Because honestly, it slaps. You lean back, look at the stars, and remember the first time you played upside down. How the world tilted, how the god flinched, how for a heartbeat the divine faltered before the human. You smile. You don't need justice. You made history, even if they don't tell it quite right. Because the right people, the ones who need it, will hear the melody anyway. And in the end, that's all music wants, to be heard, to be felt, to live. And as the fire crackles and the stories spiral into the dark, your heart, old-hooved and stubborn, keeps time with the earth itself, still playing, still imperfect, still free. They say the gods no longer walk among us, and maybe that's true. Maybe they've retired to their marble lounges and ambrosia brunches, tired of meddling, bored of mortals who keep reinventing instruments out of gourds and sheep bladders. Maybe Olympus has closed for renovations. Maybe the divine just moved on. But you, You're still here, not in the flesh, not really. Your hooves have softened into dirt. Your laugh, once sharp and wine-wet, now rustles through leaves. Your melodies, they hide in unexpected places, between the breeze through pine needles or the rhythmic drip of water in a cracked cave roof, or in the hiccup of a child learning her first scale. You are not a ghost. You are a resonance. And in some ways, that's more powerful, because now you're everywhere. In a cramped attic in Athens, a young boy makes a flute from a copper pipe his father tossed away. He teaches himself to play after dark so no one hears. His fingers bleed, his lips chap. But one night a single clear note floats through the rafters, and he smiles. He doesn't know why, but it feels right. In a dusty tavern on the edge of Thessaly, an old woman hums a forgotten tune to lull her grandson to sleep. She calls it the river's lullaby. She has no idea it once came from a satyr who refused to stop singing even when his gods turned away. In a bustling agora, a pair of teenagers slap rhythms onto amphorae and argue about tempo. A bystander sneers, "That's not music." They look at each other, grin, and play louder. Each moment, a seed. Each note, a rebellion. And behind them, just beyond the edge of hearing, is your laughter, low, warm, and entirely unconcerned with approval. Because they've learned your most important lesson. Play anyway. Even the gods feel it, especially Apollo. He hears it during his private concerts when the lyre rings too perfect, and the silence after is deafening. He feels it during festivals when mortals dare to improvise instead of recite. He sees it in the eyes of musicians who don't look at him with awe, but with challenge. And it unsettles him, not because he lost, but because the music never stopped. He doesn't try to silence it anymore. Instead, he listens. Sometimes alone, at dusk, he even plays the old tune, the one you hummed under your breath before the contest, the one he pretended not to hear. And, for a fleeting moment, he almost smiles. Almost. There's a theory among some modern philosophers, those fringe types who wear sandals in winter and drink too much pine wine, that Marsyas didn't lose the contest, that the flaying, the punishment, the agony were metaphors, symbols for shedding old skins, for tearing away what the world demands in order to reveal what the soul actually wants to play. They argue that you won, not by besting Apollo's technique, but by proving that raw, ugly, real music has a place in the world. Historians roll their eyes. Theologians sigh. But the artists, they nod, because they feel it. They live it. Every time they pick up an unapproved instrument or write an unsellable song or play a note that makes someone weep for no clear reason, they carry you forward, and they don't need a statue for that. They just need breath and rhythm and the courage to play something that might fall apart halfway through. The grove remains. Fewer people know the way now. It's not on any map. But when you're lost, really lost, the path sometimes reveals itself. Only at dusk. Only when the need is true. And those who find it, they leave changed, not enlightened, not God-touched, just softer, more human, more willing to play the wrong note with pride. And if, as they leave, they hear laughter in the leaves or a melody in the wind, they never question it. They just smile and hum along. You'd think after all this time the world would have settled into some kind of rhythm, but no. Mortals are still as chaotic and glorious as ever. Their cities change shape, their instruments evolve, their music shifts from flutes and lyres to fiddles to brass, to screaming electric boxes that echo across coliseums of light. Sometimes the noise is so loud, you wonder if anyone can still hear the quiet. But someone always does, because underneath every bombastic anthem, beneath every perfectly mixed track, there's still that raw, trembling note, the one that dares to be imperfect. And that's where you live now, in the glitch, in the offbeat, in the cracked voice that keeps singing anyway. There's a girl in Rhodes who plays a one-stringed instrument she built from a chair leg and some fishing wire. Her music is terrible and brilliant. She doesn't know who Marsyas is. She doesn't care. But you hum along anyway. There's a busker in Delphi who plays spoons and tells jokes in between verses. Tourists toss coins without really listening. But one old man cries during the last verse. The busker doesn't notice. You do, and there's a child. There's always a child somewhere in the hills, tapping rhythm into a stone wall, not knowing they're rewriting history with every beat. It never stops. Not really. Even when the music fades, the urge doesn't. That defiant little ember of sound that says I'm here, I exist, and I refuse to be quiet just because I don't fit your mold. You never asked to be a symbol, but symbols aren't chosen. They're used. And you ragged, half-remembered stubborn, you have become something far more lasting than a myth. You've become permission. At a music school in Athens, a professor tells his students that Marsyas was a fool, that he challenged a god and got what he deserved. That talent must bow to divinity. A student raises her hand. She asks, "But wasn't the music good?" The room falls silent. The professor doesn't answer. Not because he can't, but because deep down he remembers. He knows. Back when he was younger, before the robes, before the lectures, he too played something messy and beautiful and real. He turned away from it, but it's still inside him. And tonight, after the students go home, he picks up his old flute, just to see, just to try, and in the stillness of his study, one crooked note drifts out, and your laughter fills the air again. The gods have long since stopped interfering. The muses visit now and then, dressed like poets or tourists. They linger near concerts or open mics or the back corners of dive bars. They hum along. They steal good lines. They whisper inspiration into half-asleep minds at 3 a.m. But they don't judge anymore. Not after what happened. Not after you. The festival of the lyre still happens somewhere, though no one calls it that now. It's just a gathering, a campfire, a couch in someone's basement, a live stream where a girl cries while strumming 4 chords she barely knows. It's music, and it's alive. And you are everywhere in it. Not the flayed one, not the loser, not the warning, but the heartbeat, the laugh, the breath before the note. Every few decades, someone tries to write a definitive version of the myth. A new scroll, a novel, a play, a podcast with dramatic reenactments and questionable accents. They always start the same way. In the time of the gods, there was a satyr named Marsyas. And you, wherever your spirit drifts in that moment, you roll your eyes so hard, the clouds shift slightly, because you know how it ends, or rather, how they want it to end. But the funny thing about stories, they mutate. No matter how tightly they're held, they leak into memory, into rumor, into drunken songs, shouted across fields at midnight. Every retelling chips away at the marble pedestal. Every whispered retort adds a crack in the foundation. And now the cracks are wide enough for wildflowers. In a quiet village near the border of Lydia, your old stomping grounds, there is an annual spring festival. No one remembers what it used to be for. It's just tradition now. There's dancing, food, wine, but no lyres. Only flutes, dozens of them. Some carved from river reeds, others shaped from metal scraps. One girl brings a flute made of clay that looks like it might dissolve if you breathe too hard. They don't compete. They collaborate. It's messy, off-key, sometimes transcendent. At the end, they don't declare a winner. They just fall asleep in a heap under the stars, dreaming of notes that don't exist yet. And on the edge of the celebration, there's always one child, half asleep, dirt-smudged eyes wide, who looks up at the trees and whispers, "Thank you, Marsyas." You never answer, but the breeze does. Elsewhere, in an ivory-clad theater with perfect acoustics and painfully uncomfortable seating, a virtuoso performs a new composition, the Satyr's Requiem. It's technical, cold, brilliant. The audience applauds. But one old woman in the back row shakes her head. Too many notes, she mutters. Not enough soul. And just like that, the myth cracks a little more. Because you were never about mastery. You were about meaning. And the world is finally remembering. There are theories now. Petitions to rename certain constellations. Debates in academic circles about the political undertones of your punishment. Long essays with titles like Satyr and Sovereignty. Reclaiming subaltern voices in Olympian narrative spaces. You don't understand half of it, but you approve. Because buried beneath all the jargon and footnotes is one stubborn truth. You mattered. Not because you won, but because you refused to stop. Even when the world told you that your music was wrong, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. And now, centuries later, your name is less of a warning and more of a whisper, a secret between musicians, a wink between rebels, a tremor in the chest just before the first note is played. They call it Marsyas's courage. That moment when you know what you're about to do might not be pretty or proper or praised, but you do it anyway. You exhale. You play. And through it all, you are there. Not as a god, not as a ghost, but as a rhythm. Somewhere on the northern edge of Mount Tmolus, half swallowed by vines, and time there's a ruin no one maps. Just a scatter of broken stones, a sunken platform, and a hollow log that used to be a bench. No one comes there to pray. No incense burns. No hymns echo. But if you sit quietly just long enough for the wind to forget you, you might hear it. A faint sound, not divine, not grand, just a melody. Simple, strange, slipping between the trees like it knows it doesn't belong. It's always different. Never the same twice. Some say the forest sings it. Others swear it's buried in the stones leaking upward. But a few, the quiet ones, the weird ones, the ones who pluck at strings when no one's watching, they know the truth. It's you, still playing, still unfinished, still free. Back in the cities where statues stand polished and speeches drone on about progress, no one mentions you anymore. Apollo's cult has faded to philosophy. The muses are now just muses, no capitals. Flutes are mass-produced. Music is digitized, compressed, uploaded, and sold back at 99 cents a track. But sometimes, rarely, someone uploads something weird. A live recording in a subway tunnel. A lo-fi snippet from a child's toy keyboard. A distorted voice, hoarse and untrained, whispering a lullaby you thought only you remembered. And those tracks, they don't chart, they don't trend, but they haunt. Because they linger in the corners of playlists, in the backs of minds, and in the hearts of those who've had enough of polish, enough of gods, enough of perfect. A music blogger once wrote a review that went viral for all the wrong reasons. It was titled, "The Flawed Masterpiece: Why We Need More Marsyas in Modern Music." The snobs hated it. The fans adored it. And the subject, a street musician who used cracked plastic flutes, loop pedals, and their own hiccups as percussion. They weren't famous, but they smiled like they knew a secret no one else had earned. You watched that performance, if watched is even the right word for what you do now. Maybe it's better to say you felt it, because your echoes ripple, not loudly, but deeply, and across time. In the myth, you were silenced, skinned, defeated, humiliated. But in reality, you became the pause before rebellion, the breath before defiance. The silence that means I'm about to make noise and I don't care if it's allowed. You're not the hero of the myth. You're the glitch in the myth, the offbeat, the smudge on the golden lyre. And if you listen carefully, the world is full of them now, tiny imperfections, tiny acts of war, all playing in your key. You never wanted worship. You just wanted to play, to exist without needing divine permission. And now, that's exactly what you've become. The patron saint of playing anyway, of doing it wrong, of making something beautiful with nothing but a breath and the will to begin. So, if someone hears your name now, whispered in the hum of a tired street lamp, in the creak of a door that swings just right, in the uneven beat of a skipping child, they won't picture pain. They'll picture possibility. Imagine this. A tiny classroom, late afternoon sunlight, slanting in like lazy fingers across chipped desks and dusty floors. The air smells like chalk and stale juice boxes. A teacher, tired tender, probably underpaid, plays a recording for her students. It's not a textbook song, not a famous melody. Just a rough, warbly flute piece uploaded by someone with 6 followers and no bio. The kids wrinkle their noses at first. It sounds weird, one says. It's off, says another. But the teacher, she smiles. Because that's the point. It is off, and that's what makes it alive. One boy in the back, the kind with tangled hair and nervous hands, starts tapping along. Not correctly, not to the beat, but consistently. And suddenly the whole room is different. They're no longer students listening to educational content. They're co-conspirators, explorers, musicians without instruments. And you're in the room, not in body, not in name, but in every unsure tap, every off-kilter breath, every heartbeat that doesn't ask permission. You're there. Later, that same boy walks home alone, playing the tune in his head, and without realizing it, he begins to whistle. It's terrible. It's glorious. A passing dog howls. A neighbor yells. But the boy doesn't stop, because something in his chest has shifted. Something has been given, a kind of sacred nonsense, a gift that doesn't glitter, but hums. And you keep walking beside him, invisible, indelible, undeniably heard across the world, in a sleek auditorium where every chair costs more than a flute. A renowned composer presents her latest piece, Marsyas Variations. It's strange, layered with fragments. It begins clean, then unravels. There's a part where the notes argue with each other, where the melody loops back on itself like a snake biting its tail. Critics call it bold. Some say confused. One just writes, too much flute. But in the 6th row, a young woman closes her eyes and cries not because it's sad, but because it feels like permission. Permission to mess up, to feel big feelings in small rooms, to try. And in that tear-soaked breath between movements, your legend becomes more than myth. It becomes practice. Somewhere a toddler bangs on a toy keyboard and calls it a concert. A teenager records a song in her closet, layers her voice 5 times, and uploads it with trembling fingers. A grandfather long retired dusts off an old recorder and plays a lullaby he once made up for a daughter who's now a mother herself. And every single one of them, they're right. Not perfect, not godly, just right. Because music isn't a judgment, it's a release. And you were never the mistake. You were the moment someone realized they didn't need permission. Not from a god, not from a rule book, not from anyone. They just needed to begin. The old myths, when they're told now, come with disclaimers. A product of their time, scholars say. Symbolic professors murmur. Problematic. The internet screams. But yours dodges neat summaries, because the more people examine it, the less it behaves. Some say it's a parable about arrogance. Others, a tragedy about envy. Still others, a divine warning wrapped in melodrama. But none of them can answer one thing: if the gods always win. Why do mortals keep telling your story? There's a philosopher half-drunk, fully tenured, who gives a lecture in a cafe instead of a classroom. He slams his mug on the table and announces, "Art is the only rebellion that doesn't end in fire." Someone in the back asks, "What about Marsyas?" The room quiets. He smiles. "Exactly," he says, and then he sips. Like that explains everything. Maybe it does. In a converted shipping container turned music lab, 2 students remix the story as a soundscape. They sample water dripping in a cave, the whisper of wind through a reed, and the low hum of a broken refrigerator. They layer it under snippets of an ancient melody played wrong on purpose. The piece is called Unskinned. They present it at a competition. It doesn't win. But someone in the crowd listens to it 3 times on the way home. And in that small, strange loyalty, your name survives. You're no longer a figure on a vase. You're a glitch in a beat, a laugh in the silence between choruses, a foot tap that refuses to match the metronome. You're the moment a song slips from control and becomes something else, something wild, something true. And the world, it's beginning to value that again. Not everywhere, not all at once, but in pockets, cracks, small rebellions that bloom in sound. There's a rumor, quiet, unconfirmed, that in the ruins of ancient Selene, someone planted reeds again. Not for harvest, not for decoration, just for sound. And when the wind blows right, and the sun is low, and the ground is soft with spring, they say the flutes play by themselves. Not a tune anyone recognizes, not a song you could hum, but something older, raw, joyful, almost like laughter, almost like you. No one carves statues of you anymore, not because you're forgotten, but because you've become something that refuses to stay still long enough to sculpt. Statues are for gods who demand stillness, perfection, symmetry. You live in movement, in improvisation. In the note, someone wasn't supposed to play, but did anyway. That can't be trapped in marble. That was never meant for temples. That was always meant for us. At an open mic night, in a rain-soaked coastal town, a young man takes the stage. His hands tremble. His voice cracks. His lyrics don't rhyme. But somewhere in the back of the room, Stranger closes their eyes, and they feel it. They don't know why, but they feel seen. They don't know you. They've never heard of satyrs, of flute contests, of ancient punishments stitched in mythology. But in that moment, they understand you perfectly, because they too have been told their voice was wrong, and they too keep singing anyway. Your legacy is passed hand to hand, heart to heart. Not in stories that end with moral lessons, but in melodies that refuse to resolve. Not in applause, but in the quiet breath that comes after a mistake and before the courage to begin again. You live in basement concerts, in sidewalk hums, in the hum beneath the hum, the almost song in the engine noise, the phantom harmony in dripping pipes. You are music as resistance, not against gods, but against silence. They used to say Marsyas was foolish. Marsyas forgot his place. Marsyas paid the price. But now, across time and continents, someone plays an off-key tune into the dark, and they don't know why. But it feels holy, not divine, but real. It's a communion of broken notes and breath and beating hearts. And though they don't say your name, your story lives in their courage, because you were never about winning. You were about trying. Trying even when they said, don't. Trying even when it hurt. Trying not to impress, but to express, and that never dies. So tonight, in every room where someone picks up an instrument for the first time, in every car where someone sings along, just slightly off pitch, in every studio where a mistake makes a track suddenly perfect, you're there. And in the hush between notes, you're heard. And now with the story played out, let the silence settle. Let your breath soften slow, like the last fading vibration of a note left hanging in air. The world of myths has slipped away. The gods have gone quiet. The satyr has stopped playing, but his echo remains. Maybe you still feel it in your chest, that rhythm, low and warm. It's okay to hold it there for a while. No need to name it. No need to do anything but feel. The flutes have long stopped playing, but in the spaces they left behind, something new grows, gentler, wiser, braver. Let your body sink a little deeper into the bed now. Let the warmth of the sheets cradle you like the moss of an old forest floor. Let the last flickers of sound drift away, replaced by quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, but full. Full of what was shared tonight. Full of stories that stretch beyond endings. Full of all the things music never needed words to say. You're safe here. You're whole. And you're not alone. Somewhere out there, the wind hums through forgotten reeds, not loudly, but with purpose. And maybe, just maybe, it's humming just for you. So rest now, float with the melody, sleep with the rhythm, and let Marsyas keep watch through the night.